That is correct, isn't it? Yes. That's how it's going to flow. Okay. Very good. So, the title I chose for today's message to bring to you is called Evolution Redefined. Now, this title comes from a song back in the 90s, mid-90s. Jeff Moore and the Distance came out with a song entitled Evolution Redefined, and I thought it was very poignant then, and probably still feel that way now, although I haven't heard it for a long time. Evolution Redefined. Because when I was in grade school, or school in general, I was taught about evolution. And when they taught me about evolution, they never told me what it really was. They were teaching it like it was truth, like it was the way the world began and the way we got here was through evolution. And me being the person that I was back then, familiar with the creation story back then, I went to Bible school too. Went to the teacher and said, "Why do you teach evolution as being the truth? What about creationism?" And the teacher said, "Well, creationism is theology and religion. Evolution is science. It's science. Evolution is science. So that's why they teach it in school, because it's science." Now, here's what you need to know. The facts on evolution, well, they probably stop somewhere here. And accepting evolution as the way that things actually occur and happen, well, that would be over here. There's quite a gap that needs to be bridged in order for evolution to actually have happened. And how do they explain that gap? Well, here it is. It is our theory. Okay, what's a theory? A theory is their best guess. It's their best guess. So we're being taught in school their best guess. Humans' best guess. Our best guess. Why are we guessing? Why are we guessing? Our best guess. And the thing is, they don't tell you it's their best guess. You've got to figure that out on your own. It's their best guess. Allow me to bring you how it really happened. Next slide, please. Oh, this is what Jeff Moore says. I like this. It takes a lot of faith to think we're accidents of nature. This is a song, actually. I'm not going to sing it, though. I believe we are the result of a living creator. You can wait 1,000,000 years hoping that nature does its part, but it only takes a moment for God to change a heart. Evolution redefined. So So we're going to go to the book of Genesis, very beginning, first chapter. Because here we learn how the world began. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and then he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. And evening passed and morning came, making the first day. Then God said, "Let there be space between the waters to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth." And that is what happened. God made this space to separate the waters from the earth, from the waters of the heavens. God called the space sky. And an evening passed, and morning came, making the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one space, so dry ground may appear," and that is what happened. God called the dry ground land and the waters seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant." And the trees grew, and the seed-bearing fruit, and these seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came. And it is what happened. The land produced vegetation, all sorts of seed-bearing plants and trees, and seed-bearing fruit, and the seeds produced plants and trees of the same kind, and God saw that it was good. And evening passed, and morning came, making the third day. Then God said, "Let lights appear in the sky and separate the day from the night. Let them be signs and mark the seasons, days, and years. Let the lights in the sky shine down on the earth." And that is what happened. God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day, the smaller one to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed, and morning came, marking the fourth day. And then God said, "Let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water, and every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply. Let the fish fill the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And evening passed, and morning came, marking the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth produce every sort of animal, each producing offspring of some kind, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and wild animals." And that is what happened. God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock, small animals, each able to produce offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image to be like us," God, Father, Holy Spirit. "They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, and all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground." Then God said, "Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth, and all the fruit trees for your food, and I have given you every green plant as food for all of the wild animals, the birds in the sky, the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life." And that is what happened. Then God looked over all he had made, and he saw that it was very good. And evening passed, and morning came, making the sixth day. Now, on the seventh day he rested, and so it was that the world was created and everything in it. That's how it happened done. Why? Because that's what God says. And you know, all the scientists that came up with evolution, their best guess, have never disproven what you've just heard. As much as they've tried, they could never disprove what you've just heard. You know why? It's very hard to disprove what happened. It is. But it was our best guess. As humans, it was our best guess. See, humans we weren't setting out to create problems, but we thought our way was better than God's way. And this is a theme that runs throughout the Bible. We'll talk about more of that today. We thought our way was better than God's way. That's how we came up with evolution. It's a better way because there's data over here to prove evolution over there somehow, some way. Takes a lot of faith to believe we're accidents of nature. Next slide, please. You may have heard the devil is in the details as a saying. I believe that's true in this sense. When I was taught evolution, it didn't change the way I felt about creationism, but it did plant a seed of doubt in me. It did. I was a young, impressionable child, and there was a seed of doubt. That seed of doubt is long gone. But when I was taught evolution, there was that seed of doubt. See, Satan can plant seeds of doubt. Now, he can't water them. He can't make them grow. But you can. You can. And you do. I do. We do. We let those tiny little doubts make us think that somehow we have a better way or a better idea, or God surely didn't mean that, did he? He probably wanted me to do this instead of what he says because this fits into my plans. Kind of like evolution fit into Darwin's plans. That's how it came about. It fit. It fit in his plans. Wasn't that convenient? It fit in his plans, and then it became so large that they teach it in our schools. Do they still teach it in our schools? They teach it in our schools as factual truth. How does a little seed of doubt get that big in our world? The Bible gives us the truth It's godly, spiritual truth. All the way down to the little tiny fine print. I was also told as a young man that the Bible, while true, had conflicting information in it. It's not true. If you've heard the same thing, what's conflicting is us. We don't understand God's way, God's mind. But that doesn't make the Bible conflicting. It makes us conflicting, and it's Satan that plants the little seeds of doubt. And once they get in there, we start thinking crazy things like, well, aren't all major religions kind of similar anyway? Because you know they are. They all worship a God just like we worship God. And so, soon you start thinking, well, then aren't there multiple ways to heaven? Why couldn't there be multiple ways to heaven? Shouldn't there be multiple ways to heaven? That's what's wrong with you Christians anyway. You are so self-centered to think there's only one way. There's only one way, but it's not our fault because we didn't do it. There's only one way because there's only one person who died for the sins of the world. We didn't do that. But that's why there's only one way, because there's only one Christ who suffered and died on the cross and then rose again so that our sins could be forgiven and we could be with him in paradise. So the Bible is true even down to the fine print. Next slide, please. I want to take a look at a verse in Mark, starting in chapter 8. You can follow along if you choose. In the Bible, because it's true. Jesus said to his disciples as he left Galilee, he went to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, Who do people, humans, say that I am? And you got to love people's responses because they're so messed up. Who do people say that I am? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say you are one of the prophets. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? Now Peter, one of the 12, very excited, said, I got this. You are the Messiah. The anointed one, the Messiah. That's what it means in Hebrew. Messiah in Hebrew, the anointed one. And then in Greek, Christ means Messiah. You thought that was Jesus' last name, didn't you? Christ is Messiah in Greek, the anointed one. But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him because it wasn't the right time at that moment. Don't tell anyone just yet. And then Jesus began to tell them this, and this perplexed Peter. He began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, talking about himself, but 3 days later, he would rise from the dead. And he talked about this openly with the disciples, so they would understand. Talked with them openly. Now, Peter took Jesus aside and reprimanded him. He did. Peter reprimanded Jesus. He said, for saying such things, he was like, Jesus, why are you being such a downer? Telling us all this stuff that, you're going to die And because, see, they had it good. Jesus was very popular. They were popular. So everybody was popular, and that's a good feeling. And that's kind of how the disciples were when Jesus was performing all his miracles. Everybody wanted to be near him. It was a popular place to be. And then Jesus started telling him this, and Peter's like, don't tell us this stuff. This can't possibly happen. You're God. You're the Messiah. Remember, he understood this from the previous verse. You're the Messiah. This will not happen. And Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples. And what did he do? He reprimanded Peter. He reprimanded Peter, his disciple, pretty harshly. He said, "Get away from me, Satan." He said, "Get away from me, Satan." He said, "You are seeing," this is why he said it, "you are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not God's. You are seeing things from a human point of view, not God's. Not God's. God had a different point of view. And Peter, you're not seeing it. You have a human perspective, kind of where we got evolution from. Our human perspective. Evolution's got to be right because that's our perspective. But we're looking at it from a human point of view and not God's point of view. Then calling the crowd to join his disciples, Jesus said this, and this is amazing. This is really amazing, what Jesus says here. He said, if any of you wants to be my follower, the disciples, you must give up your own way and take up the cross and follow me. Now, they knew what a cross was. We may not know what a cross was, but they knew. Because they lived around the Romans, and the Romans crucified people. And they left them there on the cross for days and days and days. So they rotted, and it stank, and it was horrible. So when Jesus said, take up your cross, they had a picture. They knew what that meant. And follow me. Because if you try to hang on to your life, who wants to hang on to their life? If you try to hang on to your life, which would be almost anybody, right? You want to hang on to your life. We exercise, we eat right to hang on to our life. So if you want to hang on to your life, what does he say? You will lose it. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose your life. Me, you, everybody. Anything you have, anything you will have, anything you might have had, you're going to lose. You are. You're going to lose it. That's what Jesus was saying. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose it anyway. You're going to lose it no matter how many exercises you do, no matter how many times you run around the block, you're going to lose it. You are going to lose it. But here's what you need to know. You can lose it with a purpose. You can lose it for a reason. And that's what Jesus said right here. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. You will take something that you have to give up anyway, that you're going to lose anyway. But if you lose it for me, If you lose it for Jesus, if you lose it for the good news, you will sin. Wow. That's good stuff. Try finding that in Darwin's books. That's good stuff. And what, he goes on, Jesus goes on in these verses, and what would it benefit you if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? So think about this. Is anything worth more than your soul? If you were going to die and you had all the wealth that you could possibly ever imagine, and you were going to die and lose your soul, at that moment, what would you give to get your soul? Well, here's the answer. Yeah, I already heard it. You'd give everything. You'd give everything you had. Why? Because you're going to lose it anyway. You would give everything you had to save your soul. Of course you would. Yeah. You would give it all to save your soul. And you're going to lose it anyway. So we'd give it all to save our soul. If anyone then, he continues, if anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of you, that person, when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So if we're ashamed of Jesus, and Jesus will be ashamed of us. And it's because we are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's. We look at things from a human's point of view. We're human. We look at things from a human's point of view, not from God's. But that's where this comes from in our lives. That's why we might be, if we could be, ashamed of Jesus, because we're looking at things from a human point of view and not from God's point of view. Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. You cannot earn it. You cannot buy it. It is freely given to you. It's free. For all who will. Jesus took care of that. Jesus died on the cross, shed his blood, so that our sins would be forgiven. The one way Jesus took care of for us, salvation is free. Following Christ in our lifetime and at some point will cost you something. Following Christ in this lifetime on this earth will at some point cost you something. We have to deny ourselves. Say, well, what does that mean? Well, we deny ourselves all the time, don't we? Chocolate cake? No, I'm going to deny myself. It's a way of denying yourself. So we're familiar with that terminology. But following Christ is going to cost us something. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Jesus said, Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my burden I give you is light. And it is. Jesus said it is, and that's true. But do you notice it's still a burden? It's still a yoke. There's still a cost at some point in our lives for following Jesus on this earth. If you haven't experienced yet, wait for it. It'll come. When you come to the place where you have to choose God's way or your way, what will you choose? What will you choose? It's two ways to go. One way seems kind of right and could be good, and this is a good, solid plan. May not be God's way. Maybe Darwin's way. It was a good, solid idea, sort of, kind of, maybe. From a human perspective, it sounded darn good. What about God's perspective? So what will you choose? How do you want the story to end? Do you want the story, when you come to the place where you have to choose my way or God's way, in the end, do you want to tell people, well, I chose my way and it didn't work? Or you want to tell people you chose God's way and it was the solid foundation? Sometimes we think our way may seem like a good way, like Darwin, and like this person, Judas Iscariot. You probably just cringed when you saw that. Judas was a betrayer. Worst of his kind, he betrayed Jesus with a kiss. That's horrible. But folks, what was he thinking? What was Judas thinking? See, he had a human plan. Judas had a human plan. See, remember, they were popular. They were the in crowd. They were the guys. Judas just wanted to move it along a little faster than what was happening. Judas was there when all those miracles were happening. He saw them. He heard, he was there when Peter said that Jesus was the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one. Judas knew who he was. And yet, what happened? Let's take a look at how this started. I say started. This isn't where it started, but this is the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. Matthew 26:6. Meanwhile, Jesus, he was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. And while he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume, and he poured it over Jesus' head. The disciples were indignant when they saw this. Now, we know from reading all the scriptures that it was Judas that started the indignancies. Judas kind of went around and said, "Can you believe this? Can you believe what just happened here?" And got the other disciples talking about it as well. "What a waste," they said. "It could have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor." And here's what Jesus said. What he could have said, "Your ways are not my ways." But here's what he said. "Why criticize this woman for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Now, Judas was not concerned so much about the poor. That was a good excuse. He wasn't concerned so much about the poor. He was concerned about getting all that money into the bank account so he could skim a little off the top. So she poured out this perfume, Jesus says, "onto my body for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." What are we doing here? Can you believe that? You tell me Jesus isn't real? We're talking about the very thing that Jesus said we would talk about. And we're remembering it. Wow. That was just a little side note. Sorry about that. Pretty good, though, wasn't it? Judas was following Jesus. But he had his own agenda, his own way of thinking how things should go. Do we ever do that? Have our own ideas of how things should go? Now, here's what you have to understand about Judas. He did not fully understand what was going to happen. Let's read. I believe I have the verses up here. Yes, Matthew 26, 36 through 50. Jesus went into the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, "Sit here for a while I go over to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death," said Jesus. "Stay here and keep watch with me." And he went a little farther down. He bowed his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken from me, yet I want your will to be done and not mine." And then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. And he said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." That's Judas in a nutshell. Then Jesus left them for a second and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went on to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead, sleep, have your rest." But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12, arrived with a crowd of men, armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. Now, that's the point I wanted to bring to you here, because we look at the traitor, Judas. Yeah, the priests and elders of the people, that's who Judas betrayed Jesus to. They were Jewish. Let's read on. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. So Judas, he came straight to Jesus, greeting. Rabbi, he exclaimed, and gave him a kiss. And Jesus said, my friend. Interesting choice of words. My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for. And we know the rest. He betrayed Jesus, but let's go into Judas' head for a minute, if you will. He betrayed him into the hands of the Jewish leaders. Folks, there was no crucifixion in Jewish law. Judas had no idea that he gave Jesus up to be crucified. Judas could not know that the Jewish leaders were going to hand Jesus over to the Romans, which is what happened. It got out of hand. Judas had a plan, and the crucifixion was not it. Judas had a plan. And when Judas realized his plan went haywire, well, we know what he did. He killed himself. Judas did not intend for the outcome to be what it was. But it was what it was, because you can't change God's plans. You can't. And sin, even though we plan and never plan for the big sin, it's just a little tiny doubt, and it's nothing, really, it's okay. It's just a little thing. This is my plan, and all of a sudden, it goes haywire. And we end up doing something, saying something that we never intended. We never planned our sin to get that big. It just happened. That's how sin works. It starts out as a good thought, good plan, little seed of doubt, little tiny thing that's okay. We can just gloss over that. Nobody will know, and they won't. But when it grows unintendedly and we don't pay attention to it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden we got a weed tree that we never intended. We never saw it coming. My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for. We cannot force God's hand, and we cannot change God's plan. So we should never hold on to anything tighter in this world than we're holding on to God. No matter how good the plan, we shouldn't hold on to it tighter than we're holding on to God. Can't change God's plan. So in review, salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Following Jesus in this life at some point will cost you something. God's hand cannot be forced. His plan cannot be thwarted. It can't. The devil will try and get us off track with seeds of doubt. Little tiny things. Little tiny seeds. Nothing really significant. At least it won't seem that way at the time. But as our plans morph and grow, even though they started out as a little puppy or a nice little cute kitten, what are those little gremlin animals, that were cute and then all of a sudden morphed into things that, what were they? Yeah, they were gremlins. Okay, well, good. All right, there they are. Yeah, little gremlins, cute, and then morph into, it wasn't something that was planned, it's something that happened. They can grow our plans because it's our plan. It's not God's plan. It's something we created, we birthed. It's our human idea. It's our best guess. It's our best guess. Why don't we teach it in our schools? It's our best guess. It's our plan. It's what we came up with. Instead of focusing on God's plan and what He came up with. And that's here. So we can read it. It's not in some foreign place, hard to discover. It's right here, if you will. We can read it. We should read it every day. It's right here. It's God's plan, not man's plan. Man's plans, as we can see, get messed up. We need to renew our minds and strengthen our faith. And that's the crux of what Jeff Moore and the Distance, his band, was trying to get across when they sang the song Evolution Redefined. We need to renew our minds, strengthen our faith, and accept the change in our hearts that only God can do through reading the Word, through prayer. We're told to pray without ceasing. Continually have prayer on your mind. Continually have the Word of God on your mind. That way, when those little seeds do creep in, those little seeds of doubt, how could creation really be true? Really? That's just a nice story. That can't be true. That's just religion. We have Darwinism after all. We have evolution after all. And they told me that was true. Or at least they didn't tell me it was a human guess. They forgot that part when I was in grade school. And they caused me to doubt. They did. They probably caused a lot of children to doubt. They probably do. But if your kids are in this, if they're studying this, if they're reading the truth, those doubts can be crushed. Those doubts can be removed. Because it only takes a moment for God to change a heart. We can wait 1,000,000 years hoping nature does its part. But it only takes a moment for God to change a heart. And that is evolution redefined. It is. Evolution redefined. It's God's plan, not our plan. not man's best guess. We could do lots of that. It's God's plan, not our plan. And it's right here for everybody to read and pray and read and pray and read and pray, and it'll get in you. You'll start to understand it. It'll start to make sense. God can reveal his plan through you, through the words that you read in Scripture. Because this is God's plan. And it's God's plan for you. And for me. And it doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter what they write down as the facts or best guesses. It's a theory, you know. It's our best guess, which I'm not going to tell you because that sounds so frivolous. And yet, this is just religious, spiritual stuff. Yeah, it is. It's just God's plan. And it's not going to change. So we better find out about it. Because it's not going to change. And yes, at some point, it may cost us something. But you know what? You were going to lose it anyway. Why not lose it for a purpose? Why not lose it for a purpose? Folks, here at Celebrate Christ, we have an open communion. Anyone with a relationship